let me say how this justification for war makes no sense. If the idea of the operation is to protect these people from Nazis, the Russian army is killing more people than the quote-unquote Nazis. So, a lot of you probably have some questions about this Azov battalion. And it's something that's brought up quite a lot. It's brought up specifically usually by supporters of the Russian invasion who try to highlight Putin's campaign of denazification, which was one of the justifications Vladimir Putin used to invade Ukraine. And the Azov battalion was at the top of that list. It's because if you look at the Azov battalion flag and a lot of its membership, it's not good. It's got some neo-Nazi connotations when you look at the symbols they have. With the black sun and the symbol here, it's not a good vibe. And we do have a quote from Azov officials saying that 10 to 20% of their membership are neo-Nazis. They have also been accused of war crimes and some pretty bad stuff. Now, the reason why these people are, and this is true, technically part of the Ukrainian military is that in 2014, when Ukraine was invaded and had Crimea annexed, and the Donbass and other parts of the country, like around Kharkiv, rebels tried to take territory and the Russians were backing them. One of the battalions that rose up to fight this was the Azov battalion. And they ended up being pretty effective fighters. And so, despite the controversy around them, despite the fascist ties and fascist membership, and despite the far-right nationalism, they were kind of allowed to exist. And even within the Ukrainian military, because the Ukrainian military was disorganized, it was disjointed, and it did not have a proper response to its territory basically being stolen. Now, somebody might say to me, well, only 10 to 20% of their members, according to Azov itself, are Nazis. I mean, the majority of them are actually not Nazis, if we were to trust their numbers. I mean, this is kind of stupid, but I have a little comic. We're at a rally, and there's a Nazi flag, and the person holding said Nazi flag is not getting kicked out. Well, you are in a Nazi rally. If you are in an organization, and said organization allows its members to be open, hateful Nazis, 10 to 20% of said membership. If you allow that, knowing the Nazi track record on human rights, then you're allowing fascism to flourish within said organization. And that is bad.
The Azov battalion. It was set up by this man, Andrei Beletsky, who has a history of racist and anti-Semitic views.
That's not a good sign, is it?
Мы националисты, мы этого не скрывали никогда.
That's the thing. Even if you were to say, oh, their founder wasn't a Nazi, they're still far-right nationalists, right? The majority of their membership are still far-right nationalists.
Вся наша идеология вот в нашем знаке сочетается в пересечении букв И и Н. Идея нации.
This is the Azov emblem being shown to Steve there. It's a pagan symbol known as Wolf's Angel, and a version of it was used by some SS units in Nazi Germany. Andrei Zumland's an expert on Ukrainian nationalism. He's looked at this, writing, the Wolf's Angel has far-right connotations, but it's not considered a fascist symbol by the population in Ukraine.
I gotta call bullshit on this. There are people that know the connotation this has internationally due to its ties to the Third Reich. I call bullshit on it. There are some people who are willing to look past that and still have that symbol. Like, there are people that still believe that symbol is like good and worth it. Just like with the red and black flag, even though that has ties to the far right. But that doesn't mean everybody's just ignorant of the fact that that symbol is used by Nazis internationally.
And he sought to make a distinction, using one fighter as an example. I know Alex is a Nazi, he said, but it's his personal ideology. It has nothing to do with the official ideology of the Azov.
That, even if that is true, you still should not have Nazis within your organization because Nazis have a terrible track record when it comes to human rights. Point blank, period.
Urgent military considerations trumped all others. Ukraine was under attack, and its then president, Petro Poroshenko, called Azov our best warriors. But when in 2015 he was asked by the BBC about the group's far-right links, his reply was blunt.
Please, don't listen to Russian propaganda.
Russia has used Azov in its propaganda for years, and as we assess claims about Azov's role in Ukraine, Context is vital here. Ukraine's armed forces total 250,000 plus 50,000 National Guard. Azov is part of the National Guard with around 1,000 volunteer fighters. It's a tiny fraction of the Ukrainian military. It's also not the same force as it was in 2014.
It is true that they are a very, 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 very small part of the Ukrainian military. Because I hear from like Kyle Kalinske and others that there's a concern that the Azov battalion is going to take over the country, and that us by funneling in money into the country, even though in 2018 we put a ban on giving guns to the Azov. If anything, I would say by the amount of attention it's getting, it's disproportionate. That in of itself probably helps them more than people would like to acknowledge. But this idea that Azov's going to take over the country by sending these guns over there, again, 1,000 fighters, tremendously small when you look at the size of Ukrainians' military. Not only that, but it continues to lose support year by year when it comes to its political branch. The right sector, Svoboda, the Azov Battalion's political party, every year they lose more and more and more votes as a percentage. They continue to lose votes. I think it's like 2% was the last election. Like, oh my God, it was like unbelievably small. The smallest it's ever been. And so the idea that this situation where Zelensky is the one getting all the credit, Zelensky and the Servant of the People Party are the party that is getting all the credit for holding back Russia. Somehow the Azov battalion is going to be the one with its 1,000 soldiers who are currently getting destroyed slowly, but getting destroyed in Mariupol, are somehow going to recover from that destruction in Mariupol, and then is going to reverse its declining polling numbers when the credits all going to the Servant of the People Party. It's ridiculous. It's a fantasy. It's never going to happen. Read my lips. This is an actual promise. If I'm wrong on this, I'll eat my hat. It's never going to happen. You're not wearing a hat, Dylan? That's why I made the promise.
While the membership was evolving, the founder also left to start a new far-right political party, a party which has failed to achieve any electoral success. But the Azov regiment that he left behind is high-profile and mainstream. This is the view of the Ukrainian government.
The only Nazi elements we have on the territory of Ukraine now are the Russian fascist army.
In the last few days, President Zelensky announced that Azov's commander in Mariupol will receive the highest national military award. But despite this acclaim, despite the evolving membership, questions about neo-Nazi links remain. In January, BuzzFeed's Christopher Miller reported that he'd seen an Azov veteran wearing white supremacist and Nazi symbols. There is, though...
Yeah, we are seeing it. But I don't believe they've been able to completely purge that 10 to 20%. And at the end of the day, it was founded as a nationalist militia. So even if it isn't Nazi, it's still, which is not as concerning, but still concerning, nationalist. Far-right nationalism, which is still scary. Do you think Russia's annexation of Crimea and backing separatists created an atmosphere where nationalism becomes more prevalent? Yes, that's my first answer. And number two, if Russia would have never annexed Crimea and backed the rebels, the Azov battalion would have never been in a position to get the power that they did get as a battalion, either politically and or militarily. Because the political party would have never been created, and the Azov battalion would have stayed basically like a group of hooligans in Mariupol. So in a way, Azov battalion is blowback for Russian imperialism.
And so, while any Azov volunteers having Nazi sympathies is shocking and worthy of note, neo-Nazis are not the threat that Russia describes. But perhaps this is not about an actual threat, and rather about something else entirely. The New York Times writes of how the word Nazi appears geared towards Russians.
This is 100% true, and I said this in my debate with Jackson Hinkle and Infrared. There are Nazis fucking everywhere across this conflict. But the problem is the people want to hype up the Nazis on one side to make them the Nazis because Slavic people have a terrible history with Nazis. If you can make your opponent the Nazis, then boom, they're the bad guys. Anything you do against them is justified. It's not that hard. So if you can paint your enemy as the Nazi, then boom, you got an enemy, because everyone hates Nazis as long as they're sensible. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let me say how this justification for war makes no sense. Number one, the accusation is largely tied to the idea that a genocide is going on in the Donbass, which both the Secretary General of the United Nations and the International Court of Justice have both denied and said there's no evidence for. But it is the same areas that they're saying they're trying to save, like Mariupol, where they've killed 5,000 civilians, or the civilian bombing of major cities like Kharkiv, or a bombing of other places in the Donbass and East, where civilians are dying in mass due to Russian bombardment. And honestly, it almost feels like morale bombing. And so if the idea of the operation is to protect these people from Nazis, the Russian army is killing more people than the quote-unquote Nazis. The second thing is, amongst the Russian force, including the Donetsk rebels, there are also a ton of far-right groups. I'm going to start with the most blatant example, the Russian National Unity Movement. So this is basically a Nazi political party. It's a neo-Nazi party. Now this is banned in Russia, right? But what it has engaged in instead is fighting within the Donbass on behalf of, I believe it was the Donetsk People's Republic, with its own militia. Now, to be clear, it was founded by the ultra-nationalist Alexander Brezhov. The movement advocated for the expulsion of non-Russians and increased role for traditional Russian institutions as the Russian Orthodox Church. So, they're neo-Nazis. I mean, they're neo-Nazis. But even though that they're neo-Nazis, the Donetsk People's Republic still allowed them to fight for them. But that's not all. We also have the Sparta Battalion, which has its own list of accusations against them for torture and other disgusting acts. Then we also have the far-right Russian Orthodox Army. Remember when we talk about the fighters in Mariupol? That's 1,000 troops. If you check here, 4,000. Now this is from 2014, so the numbers are probably not the same, but I find it hard to believe that they have less than the fighters in Mariupol. What have they been accused of? What's so bad about the Russian Orthodox Army? Kidnapping, beating, and threatening Protestants, Catholics, and members of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, as well as participating in anti-Semitic acts and murdering civilians. Cleansing of those of a different religious view. 1,000 Azov Battalion in Mariupol, terrible. 4,000 of these guys, who cares? The Sparta Battalion, who cares? Ignore that. This is why the concern about Nazis committing war crimes or the far right in Ukraine is nonsensical. Because if the Russians really cared, they would start by getting rid of the Russian Orthodox Army or the Sparta Battalion, the Russian National Unity Movement, not only in Russia, but in the places where they're backing rebels in the Donbass. And so that's why, to me, even if you accept that the Azov Battalion is bad, it is not a proper justification for invasion, because the Russians are engaged in working with groups of a similar nature that commit war crimes of a similar nature. The Azov question is simple. Azov bad, but you can't use Nazis to beat Nazis. Come on. Okay. So this is apparently a statement from the Azov regiment to Russia from 2 days ago. Russia propaganda calls the Azov regiment a concentration of Nazism. I reached out to them. Amazing people. Okay, well, that's something. Nazism is an insatiable necessity to kill people who dared to become free. It's a conviction in your own some sort of higher nation. Conviction and a right to control other people, while raping and plundering other states. Does that remind you of anything? The difference is that Azov was, is, and will remain a shield for Ukraine until the invader leaves our country. We never attacked anyone. Well, the main objective for Azov is protection and development of our country, our people, and the livelihoods of our citizens, and more important than ambitions of some politicians. We, the defenders of the hero city Mariupol, who took up shield and sword, are protecting from the forces of evil and lies not only Ukraine, but also the whole civilized world from the plague of the 21st century. If we lay down the sword, tomorrow the same fate will reach Kiev, Lviv, and a day after tomorrow, Warsaw, Berlin, and Paris. They really believe they hold the whole Western world in their hands, huh? To thinking the Russian people, we want to wish to overthrow the government, which sends its sons to a sure death, the false illusions of a poisoned reality that of Russian people living, loving, and thriving. The Azov regiment. I still don't buy the idea that Azov is like purged all the Nazis. or like is not as far right nationalist as they once were, right? I wonder if they actually have like decreased the amount of Nazis, or like by what percentage they have, or if they have done so. Like how much have they changed? Like just coming out with a statement of we are not Nazis. Then again, like if you wanted people to feel safe with you, since there's a stigma for good reason around Nazism, you probably wouldn't come out and just say, hey, look at us, we're Nazis, we're fascists. Also, this was terrible. Look at this. This right here.
Дякую за увагу. До побачення.
That shit is just fucking Islamophobia. That's just terrible. Okay, so that's enough on Azov. I think you guys get my opinion on Azov now.